Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Discussing Film Newscast. As always, we have a jam-packed week of news for you. We've got Knives Out casting, we have a real controversy over the HFPA leading to the cancelled Golden Globes, and we have new release shows in DC. I am Michael Slavin as always, and I'm joined by Beatrin Shazad, who we lovingly refer to as Bean throughout the episode, so make sure to stick around and find out all the best news. So, the biggest piece of news since the last episode, so there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter of what's your perfect Knives Out 2 cast, and Rian Johnson had been clearly taking notes because they've revealed a completely all-star cast of both big names and sort of people who have been doing a few projects but you wouldn't expect to be making this sort of all-star cast. So it's a fantastic blend of the two. It's been being released in sort of drips and drabs, but so far we've got Dave Bautista, Edward Norton, Janelle Monáe, Kathryn Hahn, Leslie Odom Jr., and the day of recording we actually got Kate Hudson being added to the cast. So what stands out to you as the highlights, and what do you think this kind of says with them filming in Greece at the moment?
I have no idea how Greece plays into this cast, but I am glad, because I remember I mentioned last time, I was like, oh, I want to see like more diverse like people, and that doesn't necessarily mean like diverse in like skin tone or race and ethnicity, because like Dave Bautista is like a very different kind of person than Janelle Monáe.
Absolutely.
So I feel like we'll see like a lot bigger characters because they're very like different people.
It almost feels like a Poirot film or something like that. The way they're like I think they're all going to be playing such exaggerated versions, and that's what I really want to see. I don't want to see that sort of a safe version of the first film almost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the first film was just very like, it wasn't safe in terms of like how it did its story, but it's safe in terms of like all the characters it had, because like there was a clear, I don't want to say like political, but it was like a political like goal. So everything the characters did were centered around that kind of like one idea and that one story they were trying to tell, with having one wealthy family fight over resources. So having a lot more characters with a lot more different motivations, it's kind of harder to write for a murder mystery, and there's definitely more like you have to do. So I'm glad that it looks like they're at least going to go with that.
It's one of those casts as well where it's like, I've been trying to think for this episode. I keep thinking like, oh, if you had to pick out a highlight of it, what would it be? And every time I look at it, I think of a different person, because I think about Dave Bautista and the fact that he's transitioned over from wrestling, and his resume since then is ridiculous. And it's not The Rock, it's not John Cena, where they're playing into action and comedy, which works for their background. Dave Bautista has been taking like quite serious dramatic roles, and this is a continuation of that. And it's really interesting. But then you got Edward Norton, love him doing more comedy, he's hilarious. Janelle Monáe, brilliant, love the idea of her and more stuff. Leslie Odom Jr. from One Night in Miami was absolutely outstanding. Kathryn Hahn, you know, with how great she was in WandaVision and how she's been this consistently great actor who seems to be finally getting the roles that she deserves. It's just such a great all-round cast. I
forgot about Kate Hudson.
Yeah. I honestly don't know a ton about Kate Hudson, like, as an actor. I wouldn't say I'm like, she doesn't stand out to me quite as much as the other roles. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm sure she'll be. I have faith in Rian Johnson that she will be great if she's been cast in it. But just it's just such an interesting cast. And if you're talking about why Greece plays into the casting, it's because I'm still holding out hope that Stellan Skarsgård and the Mamma Mia boys will be able to appear in the film. It would be elite casting, and you know it.
If Colin Farrell, is that his name?
Colin Firth.
I get him. Colin Firth, bad.
Colin Farrell's the Irish one. Farrell didn't give it away.
Anyway, shut up. if Colin Firth, if he got cast instead of Edward Norton, I would have been very happy.
I guess. I just since Birdman, I'm like Edward Norton in roles where he's just going absolutely crazy. I want to see it. Sure. So, similar to how we did some predictions with the Oscars, we thought it'd be like a fun little thing that if we're right, could make a great clip. We're going to make a couple predictions for who we think, with it seemingly every couple of days someone new being added to the cast, we thought we'd try and predict a few people. So, do you want to go first, Bean, or would you like me to give my predictions?
No, your predictions are semi-cursed. So, my prediction is that I'm looking at the cast, I'm looking at the types of people who have been cast, and I have noticed with my keen eye that there is no young person in this cast, like no like early to mid-20s person. And I feel like there will probably be one cast. So my prediction is Ty Sheridan, just because he never gets cast in anything good, and I want him to be in a good movie because I'm tired of suffering through his bad ones. Thank you.
Interesting. I see it. I think he should be in more good films. He is in a lot of very bad ones. My prediction, you've called it curse. I have one which I want to see and feels obvious, and I'm not going to claim to be super original with it. I think all the people casting Kelly Marie Tran in it, absolutely. She deserves more roles. She was completely... several words I'm not allowed to say on this podcast by Star Wars and by the Star Wars fandom. I think that her and Rian Johnson clearly work really well together, and it would just be a really interesting casting. Now, the one that Bean is calling cursed is not something I'd want to see, but it's realistic. Leslie Odom Jr. has already been cast, and who's Rian Johnson good friends with? Lin-Manuel Miranda. I can't even say his name right. Lin-Manuel Miranda.
The cursed LMM.
And, like, what would add more dredge to the film than just in the background of every shot, you just see Lin-Manuel Miranda just beatboxing, just rapping off the beat, just biting his lip and looking at the camera from afar. I think that would add a real sense of dread and dramatic weight to Knives Out 2. So I'm predicting that one of those two will be cast in the film.
Well, you know, Leslie Odom Jr. was in another murder mystery movie with a really big cast. And there were several cursed people in that cast.
Are you going to say what
Johnny
the film
Depp was in
or
that
is it,
cast.
Or is it...
It was Murder on the Orient Express. He was in that movie.
I see.
And Johnny Depp was also in that movie.
Johnny Depp was also in that movie.
Daisy Ridley was in that movie.
Josh
Gad was in that movie.
Are you predicting Johnny Depp to be in Knives Out 2?
No, I'm just saying that there has to be one extremely cursed person for every murder mystery adaptation Leslie Odom Jr. is in.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't want to... Okay, that makes it sound like Lin-Manuel Miranda is, like...
problematic. He's not. He's just funny.
He's not.
It's just for people who
I don't want to see him in this movie.
Just search up Lin-Manuel Miranda biting his lip and you'll understand exactly how we feel. Like, you'll have a very visceral reaction.
Okay. I don't think... You can't... He knows what he's doing with the lip biting thing. The thing... I'm not going to get into the Lin-Manuel one, because I used to be a huge... Yeah, I used to be a huge fan. Like, if you search that, I used to, like, tweet at him all the time. So, it's been a long journey to unlearn. Okay?
Is the news next week going to be that you got a restraining order from Lin-Manuel Miranda?
Yeah.
So moving on.
Anyways,
there has been a lot of news regarding the HFPA, which is the Association of Hollywood Critics, essentially, and as a result, the big news from that is that the 2022 Golden Globes has been cancelled by NBC, releasing a quote saying, "Change of this magnitude takes time and work, and we feel strongly that the HFPA needs time to do it right. As such, NBC will not air the 2022 Golden Globes." This is as a result of the fact that, I say, like, revealed, it's been known for ages, but it is finally something that people are doing something about. The HFPA was this super weird association that was super exclusive, super small, and super white and old, and in no way reflective of the growing diversity of Hollywood. And people are finally speaking out about it and how they were a pretty awfully run association. So it's good to be seeing change like this, even though it's sad that they've clearly been so awfully run and so what's the word? They've been treating actors quite poorly and treating those who should be getting a chance quite poorly. So what was the bit of news that stuck out from you regarding this?
Well, I think one of the first person, I can't be sure, but one of the first people who spoke out was Scarlett Johansson, who had been like, she'd been a victim of a lot of sexist comments. Mm-hmm. And then once she spoke out, it was like an avalanche of people. It was like a ton of people. It happened very quickly. Like, she made her comments, and within a week, the show was canceled, which makes me think that it's way worse than we even thought.
Yeah, I
because
agree.
They canceled it because the more things that would have come out would have just been a worse, and they've probably been covering it up for years, honestly. So I'm glad it's been canceled, but I'm gonna have to like see concrete examples of change before I like open my hearts up to them, because I know that like them canceling it was literally damage control before the worst of the worst came out. Because I can promise you that's what happened.
Yeah, for reference, what Scarlett Johansson said is she spoke out about how she had received, and this is a quote, sexist questions and remarks by certain HFPA members that bordered on sexual harassment. It is the exact reason why I, for many years, refused to participate in their conferences. And I think there are very famous clips of like when Scarlett Johansson was doing press tours for Marvel, and she'd be regularly asked about her exercise routine. Do you wear underwear in that thing? You know, just awful comments. And it seems like a lot of those, from what Scarlett Johansson is saying, was from HFPA members. So it has been quite a big week for that, but it is good to see change happening with that, with the lack of diversity and the certain comments made by certain members.
Dude, there's literally a video of her like getting groped by a reporter. Yeah. And he just like tried to like he's like, oh, I think the reporter was gay or something. He was like, oh, it's not a big deal or something like that. Mm-hmm. But like she's been a victim of a lot. So no matter your personal feelings about Scarlett Johansson, I think we can believe what she's saying in this instance.
Absolutely. So moving on, a big piece of news from this week was an announcement of the directors for the upcoming Batgirl film that DC is going to be producing. Now, originally, this was Joss Whedon, who subsequently left the project, and instead, it went to the directors of the newest Bad Boys film, Adil and Bilal, who are also going to be directing episodes of Ms. Marvel. I interviewed Adil and Bilal. They were lovely people. You can check that out on Discussing Film. And they actually mentioned in that, I asked, and they mentioned that they'd been going around and speaking to Lucasfilm, DC, and Marvel. And they actually listed their dream Marvel project in that, so go and check that out if you're interested by the idea of them doing Batgirl. And I've seen some criticism of this with the fact that Batgirl is a character who's been treated quite poorly in the past with her portrayals. So there's pros and cons where perhaps there should have been a female director, but there's real benefits to Arab directors being given the opportunity to produce to direct a film of this magnitude, especially with the fact that it previously was Joss Whedon, which would have been awful in so many ways.
Yes, this is definitely an upgrade from Joss Whedon. Mm. I don't like the notion that people are saying, oh, they probably looked for a female director and they couldn't find one, so they just picked these guys. Like, I have no doubt that they will do a fine job, and I'm not accusing them of being misogynist or anything like that, because I'm sure when Ms. Marvel comes out, there will be, like, no problems with, like, her depiction as a teenage girl coming from these men. But at the end of the day, the male gaze is something so prevalent in Hollywood, and just, like, as a man, you will always fall not victim, but I guess you will always that will always be your perspective. So I feel like in a lot of like female-centric stories, we should really focus on giving those opportunities to women. So,
absolutely, and it's little things like the costuming in Harley Quinn, like the fact that in sort of certain fight scenes there's like little details of like them passing a hair tie, and I know it's such a small thing and it's not actually a big thing, but it's like those are the kind of things that you only get with a female director, and so it would have been nice. But if you had to pick sort of someone to do it and you weren't able to pick a female director, sorry, a Dylan Bilal I think are a very good choice for it.
Yeah, because I think you mentioned like the treatment Barbara Gordon has gotten in the past, but it's kind of like true. She's been every time like Batman the Killing Joke, like people kind of, she is a very interesting character, but I feel sometimes when men get their hold of her, they kind of like use her a little bit as a prop or a symbol and don't like flesh her out as a character. So that's like something very important to do in this movie, just because she is this important character that has been wronged in the past by men. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Going into our next bit of DC Warner Brothers news, 2 animated series for HBO Max have been announced. Batman the Caped Crusader and My Adventures with Superman, both that look completely different in tone. Batman Caped Crusader, the poster is very evocative of Batman the Animated Series poster, and everyone on Twitter is calling My Adventures with Superman the male wife girl boss Lois show, which is completely, I'm sorry, but if someone is shocked that Superman's a male wife, I know they've never picked up a Superman comic in their life. Because, like, bro.
Bean has literally spoken to me earlier this year where we were talking about Superman. He was like, I just want good Superman content. I just want something good. And now, looks like you might be getting it.
I'm happy. Because, I don't know, and I do like more, like, fluffy Superman content. Because I feel like, because this show is going to take place, like, early Superman, like, when he's just getting his job at the Daily Planet, and he's, like, just coming into his own as Superman. That is prime Superman content location. Like, that is where you get all the good stuff. Like, Superman Man of Tomorrow came out last year, and it was around the same time frame. And it was fun. I liked that movie, and that's what I'm hoping we're seeing more of now. Now, my only setback about this.
About
my
the
only
Superman
reservation
show or about the
Batman? Superman show.
Okay.
Because yes, I have. Okay, so I was a big fan of the She-Ra TV show. Okay.
Yeah.
It was a children's show. Probably people know about it. Whatever. One of the head writer for that show, not the showrunner, but the head writer, is a producer of this show, and you can like definitely see its influences. The problem with that is that She-Ra was like diverse in many ways, but its writing room was entirely white. And after the show ended, there was a bit of a controversy, and people found out that there was like a racially charged joke that the inside writers had. And they got kind of like a lot of backlash for that. And the showrunner like apologized, but like there was no real like consequences. So now you have someone in that environment, and you look at the similarities between that show and this show, and it just feels weird. Like, I just don't want there to be another all white writer's room. Like, people a lot of times trying to include diversity because like there's an Asian Lois and a black Jimmy Olsen. And if you want to include those aspects, I think that you should also have that same kind of diversity in the writer's room. And that's what I want for this show. Like, I want this show, if you're going to include the diversity on screen and you're going to have this cute, fluffy thing for Superman fans, I want behind the screens, I also want that diversity in the writer's room. I want opportunities for more creators of color. And I just don't want a repeat of what happened. Like, I want people from that to actually learn, because I don't know how much of a hand the woman who's now the co-producer of My Adventures with Superman actually had in that inside joke, but if she was there for it, so I want her to like learn, and I don't want the same thing to happen. Like, there's a problem with like animation being super white, and I think we have to fix that, because you can't just put characters of color on screen and then have all white creative teams. I don't like that. I hate that, and I hope they're listening right now and they take my advice.
I'm sure they are. But it's great advice, and I 100% agree with you there.
Okay. Next topic. Something equally as light and funny, I'm sure. Seth Rogen, funny guy, says he won't work with James Franco, another funny guy, anymore because of sexual misconduct allegations, which are not funny. And I feel like we've kind of known about this for years, but Seth Rogen said, I also look back to that interview in 2018 where I comment I would keep working with James, and the truth is I have not, and I do not plan to right now. Which I can appreciate that he is going back on his word. I know that if you've worked with someone a long time and you've been friends with someone a long time, it's hard to like see the person that they are and stand with the people that they've harmed, and it's not an easy thing to do. Mm-hmm. That being said, how much of this, like, is this just because the way that we talk about sexual misconduct and the way that we take social issues more seriously is changing? Like, we're being more serious about social issues probably in the past year more than ever. And I want to hope that Seth Rogen was always going to do this, but I still think that there's a lot of learning to be done. Like, you can't just disavow your friends after all these years. It's hard to like walk back and undo the damage you've done by even saying that in 2018. Because like, just because you've just suddenly realized it's a bad thing, there's like work to be done, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand you. I think there's also something to be said about recognizing that you haven't always got it right on the first try, and that like he's made a mistake, and there are a lot of celebrities who will make a sort of mistake and then not be willing to walk back on their word, but to be able to just put his hands up and go, I was wrong about that, you know, whatever influenced it. I think that is something that I respect about the fact that he was willing to admit that he was wrong in this situation.
Yeah, it just feels like a little bare minimum thing. Like,
yeah.
How do I say this? Think about the number of actors who are knowingly friends with people who have these allegations against them or are holding on to these open secrets, and they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And we need to like tell people that what Seth Rogen doing is the bare minimum, or else you're complicit, you know? Like, if you don't stand by their actions, like, you have to bring it to light. And that's the only way change is going to happen. That's the only, like, this isn't, like, something to applaud. This is, like, okay, this is the bare minimum. Good job. Now everyone else has to follow suit. And they're just not. Like, I don't see that happening, which makes me kind of sad.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving on to slightly lighter piece of news. Andrew Garfield has come out and spoken about the repeated rumours stating that he's going to be in Spider-Man No Way Home, and said, and I quote, I feel like I'm in a game of werewolf, where I say, I'm not the werewolf, I promise you I am not, and everyone is like, you're the werewolf, it's him. This was in an interview where he discussed and was asked about Spider-Man No Way Home, and he categorically said multiple times, to be completely clear, that he was not in it. There are still people online who don't believe that, you know, it's up to you. I thought it was fairly convincing, but Marvel before have, such as with the Infinity War trailer, where about half of it wasn't in the final film.
Marvel lies to our faces all the time. How many times do I have to say it on this podcast? Do not trust anything that comes out of their mouths.
Yeah, but it was the fact it wasn't directly from Marvel. Just feels a bit...
It does not matter. Literally, it doesn't matter. Okay? Remember when we had that conversation about what John Watts told Alfred Molina? John Watts could have been lying to Alfred Molina. No idea. Like, they're like, I feel like Andrew Garfield, if he is in this movie, I'm not saying he is. Many people are convinced he is. Okay? If he said that he was in this movie, he would probably, like, break an NDA. Okay? Point 2. Andrew Garfield is an actor. A professional actor. He has a Tony for acting. Yes. I don't know if he has any on-screen awards. I've only seen the Tonys. I don't watch any other shows. But But he's a professional actor. And if he is in the movie and they want to keep this silent, he would be breaking an NDA. What do you think he's going to do?
I don't think he's in the movie. Though. And do you want to know my reason as to why I don't think he's in the movie?
Why don't you think he's in the movie?
Because I think if it was a purely Marvel production, I think he'd come back to play the character. I think the fact that Sony still have a fair amount of influence over how this is being marketed, over the overall say of what's going to happen with the futures of Spider-Man characters, such as with Michael Keaton showing up in the trailer for Morbius as Vulture. I think that with the history between Andrew Garfield and Sony, where they apparently treated him very poorly, where he was fired over a completely minuscule thing, and how outspoken he's been about the issues he had with those films, and how being Spider-Man was his dream, and it kind of is awful how badly it went. I don't know. I believe him. Everyone, go and watch the interview for yourself. Decide if he is acting or not. I don't think he's the werewolf.
I don't have any opinion. Like I said, I've said this in podcasts previous time. I have made it up. No ideas. Like, I don't have any perceived notions going into No Way Home.
No fault.
Head empty. I don't know whether to believe him or not. I just know that he's a professional actor, and also Marvel money is so good.
True.
Marvel
money.
Sings. Marvel money sings. So that's all I have to say about that.
Mean, both me and Bean are aligned on one thing, and it's that we're not getting our hopes up. But if Charlie Cox is not in the film, I don't know what, something's going to be burned to the ground. It might be small, it might be large. Bean and I are aligned on this. Bean has also said this. She's in this with me. There's no going back.
No pre-criticism.
Arson is happening.
What I said specifically is that if Charlie Cox shows up in the movie and I hear the Daredevil theme played in the movie, I will cry. That's the only thing I said.
If it doesn't happen, something's being burned down.
Burn down my house. It's fine. I don't want to live in a world without Daredevil. Charlie Cox Daredevil.
So speaking of the Marvel money and whether or not Andrew Garfield is desperate for money, although he may not be returning as Spider-Man, one thing he has said he would do if he was ever desperate for money is, and I quote, "I will charge people for me to whisper in their ear, 'You better lawyer up,' from The Social Network," that famous line. I think he'd make more money if he offered to yell in people's ears, "My fuck you flip-flops, you pretentious bag." But I think he'd make more money from that. But I love this piece of news. It's so self-aware. It's great.
Sure. I don't even think it's a piece of news. I just think that you really love Andrew Garfield and you really thought his joke was funny and you're like, oh, we should include it. Because you would also pay a lot of money for him to do both of those things to you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The amount of money I would pay Andrew Garfield to whisper that in my ear, among other things. Oh. Right, so for the next piece of news, this is something that I found honestly quite inspirational, but also a little bit sad. Billy Porter came out and very bravely admitted that they'd been living with HIV for the last 14 years, saying, "I was trying to have a life and career. I wasn't certain I could if the wrong people knew. It would just be another way for people to discriminate against me in an already discriminatory profession." So Billy Porter, it's really sad, I think, that they felt that they couldn't come forward and admit this, and it's sadder still that they were probably right, and that if 14 years ago they'd admitted to having HIV, they probably wouldn't have the career that they have now. And I think that they've had to work so hard against discrimination to get to where they are now. And perhaps is it a good sign that they're able to come forward and be completely honest about this? I think it is. But again, it's a sad thing that it's taken 14 years. What do you think?
I think that HIV is very heavily stigmatized. And I think when you look at the history of LGBT rights, in America, I think we've made a lot of progress in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't know how to say this nicely, but when I was in high school, people couldn't, like, there were so few people who were out.
Yeah.
And like now in high school, it's much more common to be out and upfront with their sexuality, and you're seeing it in more children's shows. And we still definitely have a long way to go, but 14 years doesn't like sound like a terribly long time. Like that was what, 2006 or 2007?
Yeah.
So that's pretty recent, but people were using like gays as an insult then. Like people were like so much more homophobic then. So I think this is a good way to put into perspective that our history with like LGBT rights, especially in like Hollywood, had like it's not long. Like it's been a very recent phenomenon. Like gay marriage was legalized in 2015. So I think it's kind of like hard to wrap your head around how much progress we've made and how much progress we still need to make.
Yeah.
And how like violently homophobic people still were. Like less than 2 decades ago.
It's like this was slightly longer ago. This was in the early 90s. But for example, and this is not movies, this is a different avenue. But when Magic Johnson came out and said that they had HIV in 91, there were players who just openly said, I don't want to play with them. They refused to take the court if Magic Johnson was playing because of their positive HIV diagnosis. And I think when you then look to the progress that's been made where people can openly talk about this, and as far as I've seen, apart from accounts that I should have muted anyway, with 2 followers and an egg as their profile picture, there's been very little backlash from this, and you've got to, I think, recognize the progress that has allowed this to happen, but also acknowledge how much is still to come. And
well, also, I think that Twitter's a bit of a bubble.
Oh, yeah. It's an echo
I
chamber.
feel like there are still people who are, like, violently homophobic out there.
1 or 2.
But I think that there's enough people now that are openly supportive that, like, it kind of balances out. Like, there's a lot of more vocal support than there is, or equal parts vocal support and negative support at this point. And that's what allows people to talk about these things, but that doesn't mean it's gone away. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of Billy Porter, in the upcoming Camila Cabello Cinderella movie, Cinderella's not going to be released theatrically anymore. It's going straight to Amazon in September.
Yeah.
I know I just said that Twitter's an echo chamber, but Twitter does not care in the slightest about this movie, but I think it's going to do fairly well.
I think that although this is not a Disney movie, with Cinderella and who made that story famous and sort of these live action portrayals of famous animated stories not being particularly good, although doing well financially, and with the fact that Camila Cabello has never acted before and it's quite a big role for their first time, I understand why people have reservations about it, but like Billy Porter as the fairy godmother is enough to get me to watch this movie.
Okay, the thing is that Cinderella has had quite, because this is a modern adaptation, I think, but I'm not sure about that, but there have been quite a few modern Cinderella adaptations. A lot when I grew up, I think the one with Hilary Duff was a big one. The one with Selena Gomez was a big one. I think there was one on Nickelodeon called Rags, and that was a reverse gender swap. There was one on Netflix released, and it had the girl from Austin and Ally and the guy that was Alex's boyfriend in Wizards of Waverly Place. 2 people who are way too old to be playing teenagers anymore, but they were both playing teenagers. Oh, he's also in Runaways, I just remembered. He's also playing a teenager in that, even though he's too old. But both of them were in this Christmas Cinderella story. So, I think that the Cinderella live action pipeline, not even mentioning the Brandy Cinderella movie, it's from the 90s. But there have been many, 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 many Cinderella live action adaptations, and they all find their audience. Like the Selena Gomez one isn't even that great if you watch it as an adult, but so many people grew up with that movie. They love it to death. They love it to pieces. They're like, this is cinema. So I think that this could find the right niche. Like, they could find maybe 13-year-old girls will watch this movie and grow up with it and like love it till their dying breath.
Yeah.
And it will definitely find its audience if it was not releasing on Amazon Prime. Because who the hell...
It's interesting because you look at the people behind this film and it's so like, this could be so hit or so miss. Like, Kay Cannon, who's directing it, Blockers is such an underrated film. It's a great comedy, but that was her only prior film, so we don't really have a huge baseline to compare to. And this is based on a screen story by James Corden, who has taken a lot of flack, rightfully recently, for the projects that he chooses, which are often not good. But going back to what made James Corden famous, which is Gavin and Stacey, he is a very talented writer. So that's very potentially hit and very potentially miss. And, you know, if they do Billy Porter's genderless fairy godparent correctly, yeah, that could be fantastic. If they don't have the right writers behind that, it could be kind of ham-fisted and unnecessary, and like they're trying to tick off diversity points as opposed to actually making a proper change to the story for a good reason and including diversity into the film. I just think that there are so many elements. I'm just so curious to see if it's going to be an underrated classic or a bonfire, and I'll watch either way. I think
what has me apprehensive about this, because there is not a lot of creativity that needs to go into a Cinderella story, okay? You just need the bare bones and a couple funny jokes will make it sing. The problem is the movie is singing. It's a musical. Camila Cabello is going to be the lead in a musical. I don't know how I feel about that. James Corden definitely has like a musical theater background, so that's why I think that he's kind of a smarter pick than people are assuming. I know you said it was hit and miss, but I'd rather have someone who knows.
Yeah, and like I said, Gavin and Stacey,
how musicals are structured.
Gavin and Stacey is a British classic, and he's a very competent writer, it's clear from that.
But I just think that I feel like you have to have a lot of presence as a musical lead. And Camila Cabello, boy howdy, she does not have a lot of presence. So I think that's like my main reservation.
I mean, it's difficult to say because, like I said, she hasn't acted in anything before, so which is very difficult in and of itself. But I think then that's hit or miss. And like, what if it turns out that she's a fantastic actor? We don't know. It's interesting. Now, moving on to the last piece of news, I'm not going to introduce this, but I am going to comment on the fact that it does seem like every episode Bean finds a way to include this topic in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not complaining, I just want that to be noticed. Like, the wool isn't being pulled over my eyes. I am aware of this fact. Bean, what's your last piece of news?
The Muppets announced they're doing a special. It's going to be called Muppet Haunted Mansion. It's coming out on Disney Plus this fall.
I would be really curious to see
opinions.
I'm just curious to see how many episodes you've managed to get Muppets news in.
3, I think.
Including
this one.
Fascinating.
I'm sorry, maybe the Muppets should just like get off their grind. I'm sorry that too much is coming out about them. They're tearing up the battlefield.
I'm just like, you could be making some of these up and I'd just believe you.
I should do the next one. I'll just make something up.
I think you should aim from this year's podcast to have one podcast where you make up a piece of Muppets news. What's
I know, I could never disappoint Muppets Clan like that. Like,
yeah, but the Muppets Clan would know it was made up.
That's true. They're pretty tight knit.
They're pretty. You can put word around like, oh, by the way, I'm making this guy look like a chump this week. Don't worry, besties, I got you covered. You know.
So true.
Okay. What do I get if I? What do you get if you trick me, and what do I get if I notice I'm being tricked?
You get nothing if you notice you're being tricked, and if I successfully trick you, I get $20.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Okay, good. Going on to Muppets Haunted Mansion, because Michael obviously doesn't have any opinions about it, because I just asked him.
I have so many opinions about it.
Okay, let's hear it.
I don't want to tell them now.
No. This is a safe space. Let's hear it.
I think that Haunted Mansion sounds cool and spooky. And
okay,
so
I just realized
excited.
I have to explain what the Haunted Mansion is.
No, I know.
The Haunted Mansion is a...
You know.
The Haunted Mansion is a Disneyland ride. Okay.
I knew
It's a Disneyland ride, a very famous Disneyland ride. One of my favorite videos in the whole entire world is when it opened in Disneyland. They had the Osmond brothers come, like the band, Donny Osmond and his brothers. They had him come and go to Disneyland, and then they showed like how they made the Haunted Mansion. It's a cute ride. It's like spooky and cute. It's Ryan Gosling's favorite Disney ride. I don't know why I threw that in there, but yes. So I think the premise of this is that Gonzo has to stay in the Haunted Mansion overnight, but it's kind of like the whimsical kind. It's halfway between spooky and whimsical, and it's just I love the Haunted. It is such a fan favorite.
What can I say?
Yes, it is. I think this is a fantastic decision, just because the Haunted Mansion is such a beloved ride, and it's such like a unique and fun concept, and it has a lot of iconic iconography. I don't know.
Iconic iconography.
Yes, iconic iconography. It has a lot of iconic iconography, but also the Muppets, I feel like offsetting that with like the national characters of the Muppets and just kind of the goofiness of the Muppets, it will work together perfectly as long as it is written well. Because Muppets Now was more of a miss than a hit. I'm just going to say that. So
she's going rogue.
I'm not going rogue. This is all relevant information. Okay, so in 2010, the Muppets had a YouTube channel. They did a bunch of skits, and it was very funny, and they won awards for it. And I thought they were going to bring that same energy into Muppets Now, but they didn't. Muppets Now, a little bit of a flop. So I'm thinking we should go revisit that 2010 energy, and we should bottle it, and we should revisit. Let's make Muppets great again, okay? Let's revisit what made the Muppets great, and let's put that into this new special, because if this special does well, we'll be on to bigger and better things. And we can just forget about Muppets Now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Muppets Haunted Mansion releasing on Disney Plus this fall.
I love Halloween specials. I love seasonal specials.
Is that like a little hint? Are you going to like wait till a Halloween episode of the podcast and then try and trick me?
No.
Okay, so now with our Muppets wager set, with our Knives Out predictions locked in, I think that's a perfect place to end things. So make sure, as always, to go and follow at DF Newscast to keep up with all of our thoughts about the podcast and about film news in general. Make sure to follow at Discussing Film for the best place to get any film or entertainment news on all of Twitter or on Instagram. And as well as that, if you fancy it, if you think we're funny for some reason, you'd be wrong. But make sure to go and follow at Beerbean and at Michael Slaven 98